October 31st, the Supreme Court will hear oral arguments in two race-based discrimination cases against universities, both brought forward by Students for Fair Admissions. One is against Harvard and the other against the University of North Carolina, or UNC. The complaint is that affirmative action policies to help Black students discriminate against Asian students. Both cases want a review of the 2003 decision Grutter v. Bollinger. It ruled that affirmative action programs don't violate 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause as long as race isn't the only deciding factor. And critically, in the majority opinion written by Sandra Day O'Connor, she wrote, race-conscious admissions policies must be limited in time, and that the court expects that 25 years from now, the use of racial preferences will no longer be necessary. Well, we're just a bit shy of that 25 years now, and we have two guests with us today who have been following these cases very closely. Joining us now is Kenny Xu, president of Color Us United, a podcaster and best-selling author of An Inconvenient Minority, The Attack on Asian American Excellence and the Fight for Meritocracy. And importantly for our discussion here, Kenny is the leading journalist on the Harvard admissions case. Kenny, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me again.
We're nearing the end of this long journey with these two cases up in front of the Supreme Court. And just so everyone is up to speed on the arguments here, the schools do admit that they're trying to achieve the desirable goal of greater diversity, but they're not discriminating against Asians specifically to get there. Race, of course, is a factor, but not the only one. You say that race is the determining factor in limiting, and it limits how many Asians get in. What is the proof of that?
Yeah, I would say it's astounding that a university of renown as Harvard would get such basic logic incorrect. Look, Harvard has a race preferential policy in admissions. This preferential policy prioritizes Blacks and Hispanics and legacies. Asians are not part of that whole framework, so they get discriminated against. It's called a zero-sum game, guys. It's not that hard to understand. And in my book, An Inconvenient Minority, I talk about why this is a bad thing for our country. If Asians get discriminated, it shows that any group that rises to success in this country, that chooses the right path, that values education, may be a target for the left in the future. If Hispanics or if even Black Americans achieve eventually a level of success commensurate with what Asians are able to in this nation, soon you'll see the left come up with new ways to attack them for their excellence as well. And so this is what Harvard University is doing. They're using Asian Americans' traditional value of education, their love of learning, and they're using it against them in the admissions process, and it has to stop.
So this is interesting. In your book, you spend a lot of time making the case for meritocracy, and you also talk about protecting the right to the fruits of your own choices. I think that's an interesting way to think about it. Can you flesh that out a little bit in this context?
Look, every culture has different choices. Every culture has different aspirations. You know, if you grew up in an Ashkenazi Jewish culture in our country, you're disproportionately likely to pursue a career in law. You know, if you grew up on, near a basketball court and you played basketball with your friends all the time, you're disproportionately likely to be good at basketball. Everybody knows this. And what Asian Americans choose to do is to value education. We traditionally study twice as many hours as the average American. Nothing that we do in this country with regards to education isn't earned. Our families push us. They push us to be better. They push us to work harder. And we should be treated on the fruits of our labor in this country. That's what meritocracy in our country and the American dream is all about. That it doesn't matter what background you come from. If you put in the work and you have the values that support it, then you should be rewarded for it.
We're joined next by Ward Connerly, president of the American Civil Rights Institute, author, former University of California Regent, and a longtime critic of race-based discrimination at colleges. Ward Connerly, lovely to have you back on The Nation Speaks.
Cindy, it's always a pleasure to be with you.
Ward, this is an issue you've been focused on for a very long time, and in fact, you'll be speaking on the steps of the Supreme Court the day before the oral arguments to make the case against affirmative action. You're 83. You're traveling all the way from California to D.C. Why? How significant is this decision?
Well, it's not for frequent flyer miles, I'll tell you that. I'm going because I think my country is off course when it comes to the issue of race. the last thing that we should be debating in 2022 is the question of how many of these or those are serving in positions of government. Our country was founded on the principle that everybody is an equal, and our president takes an oath that he or she will enforce the Constitution. And when you get off track by talking about equity and priding yourself on ignoring equality, you're not doing the right thing. And I'm hopeful that the Supreme Court will hand down a decision that not only deals with Harvard and the University of North Carolina, but deals with all of the other abuses that this president is making in our country with regard to the use of race. The decision to appoint a female to the Supreme Court who happened to be black, I think, betrays the Constitution. She is a very talented person and is qualified in her own right to be on the court, but to appoint someone because of their race or skin color, gender, and to say it's about time. There's no statute of limitations on equality. Justice Brown, if she is qualified, and I believe she is, why make a deal of it about race? Why say it's about time? As I said, Cindy, there is no statute of limitations on when equality, the equality ideal applies or runs out. And I just fear that we are on the wrong track. We're making the wrong decision about removing behavior from grades in Chicago. We're making the wrong decision about race at UCLA when students are demanding that Professor Klein ignore the students who were not performing well based on color during the COVID era. And this thing is just going to get worse. And so I hope that the Supreme Court not only addresses the issue of Harvard and UNC, but in a broader context. Our country should not be using race in the transactions of its government. As John F. Kennedy said, race has no place in American life or law.